Procrastination is another one of those habits or those defaults that our brain gets into, really designed to keep us safe. Our brains actually love to procrastinate because it feels good, at least in the short term, right? Usually, when we're procrastinating, it's because we are avoiding something that we don't want to start. Maybe it's a phone call to a client that we're not quite sure how it's going to go. And so our brain's making up all these stories about how this could be a giant disaster that doesn't feel comfortable for your brain. So your brain's like, oh, let's just put it off. We'll deal with it another time. The problem is that one, it never really goes away, right? You're avoiding that call to your client. Every time you look at your email and see that client's name, you're thinking about that client now, right? And you still have to deal with it at some point, most of the time. So while it makes sense that our brains say, okay, in the short term, I'm going to keep us safe, I'm going to avoid this task I don't want to do, I'm going to procrastinate. In the long run, it can lead to more overwhelm because now we're behind. Now we have more stuff to do. Now our brain has had all this time to turn this small task into this giant monster, because our brains are really good at doing that as well, taking something that maybe was minor to start with and blowing it up into this giant problem that you're now going to avoid. And it's just taking more and more resources.
All right. And then plus it takes energy to actively try not to think about it, because that's
Yes.
using resources as well. All right. So what's the anecdote? What do we do?
Yeah. The fastest way to get our brains to get out of procrastination mode is, again, one, to recognize that we're doing it in the first place. One habit I see a lot here is what uh, is called productive procrastination,
Mhm.
where it's not just that we're doing nothing, we're doing all this other stuff that makes us feel productive, but we're not dealing with the thing we need to deal with. Like, I'm going to spend this hour checking my emails rather than making that call to that client, right? So I'm doing this productive procrastination where I'm doing stuff, yes, but it's not necessarily the thing that I need to get done. So recognizing that we're doing these behaviors, that our brain is defaulting to these patterns, is a really great start. And then what we want to do is be able to shift our brain from focus on short term, because that's where our brains are focused right now, is I'm procrastinating because it feels good. I get to avoid this potentially uncomfortable thing. And we want to focus them on the long term. Okay, I procrastinate on calling this client, but I'm still going to have to call them another day. And it's going to take me even longer next time. And maybe if I just call them, at least it's over with. Even if it's a giant disaster, it's done, it's off my brain space. So the more that we can get our brains to shift from the reason to procrastinate to the reason to take action, the easier it is to get out of that default.